good evening, and welcome back to the Midnight Fire. Tonight, gather close, dim the lights, and let the shadows play on the walls. I have a story for you, a tale that blurs the line between art and the uncanny, between creation and a will of its own. It is the story of what the art world came to call the portrait that painted itself. Our story begins with Julian Vance, a painter whose talent was matched only by his obscurity. He lived and worked in a dusty, forgotten studio in the heart of the city, a place cluttered with half-finished canvases and the lingering smell of turpentine. Julian wasn't interested in fame or fortune. He was obsessed with capturing a truth beyond the surface, the very soul of his subjects. But his portraits, while technically brilliant, always felt incomplete. They were like beautiful, empty vessels. He was a master of form, but a novice of feeling. One dreary afternoon, a man named Elias Thorne appeared at his studio door. Thorne was an enigma. Tall, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to hold a century of secrets. He was a collector of oddities, a purveyor of the peculiar. He had heard of Julian's singular obsession and had a proposition. He presented Julian with an old, ornate canvas, its surface strangely blank, yet shimmering with an almost imperceptible energy. Thorne called it the Canvas of Echoes. The legend, as Thorne told it, was that this canvas didn't just hold paint. It held memories. It absorbed the essence of whatever was painted upon it. "Paint something true, something real," Thorne whispered, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "Paint a portrait of someone you believe you truly know. But be warned, Mr. Vance, the canvas demands honesty, and it gives back what it receives." With that cryptic warning, he left, leaving the strange canvas leaning against Julian's easel. Julian was skeptical, but intrigued. The challenge gnawed at him. He decided to paint the one person he thought he knew better than anyone else, himself. For days, he sat before the mirror, studying his own reflection. He mixed his paints, applied the first strokes, and immediately felt a difference. The canvas seemed to pull the color from his brush, guiding his hand with an unseen force. Each stroke felt less like his own and more like a collaboration. The texture, the light, the very feel of the paint was different. It was exhilarating and deeply unsettling. As he worked, strange things began to happen. The face staring back at him from the canvas wasn't just his own. It was a version of himself he kept hidden. A flicker of arrogance in the eyes, a cruel twist to the mouth he'd never acknowledged. The portrait seemed to be painting his inner self, the parts he denied even in the privacy of his own mind. He would paint a kind smile, only to return the next morning and find it had morphed into a contemptuous sneer. He would soften a line of worry on his brow, and it would reappear deeper, etched with a despair he refused to face. The studio grew cold. Shadows in the corners of the room seemed to lengthen and twist into unfamiliar shapes. At night, Julian was plagued by nightmares filled with whispering voices and the mocking laughter of the man in the painting. His own reflection in the mirror began to look more and more like the cruel stranger on the canvas. He was exhausted, paranoid. Was he going mad, or was the canvas truly alive? Driven by a mix of fear and a desperate need to finish, he worked feverishly. He tried to fight it, to impose his will on the portrait, to paint the man he wanted to be, but the canvas was stronger. It fought back, revealing his deepest insecurities, his pettiest jealousies, his most profound regrets. It was a brutal, honest depiction of his soul, laid bare for all to see. The portrait was becoming a masterpiece of psychological horror, and he was its unwilling subject. One morning he woke up on the floor of his studio, the sunrise streaming through the grimy window. He staggered to the easel. The portrait was finished. It was him, yet it wasn't. The man on the canvas was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out, but burning with a triumphant, malevolent fire. The background wasn't his studio, but a dark, swirling void. And the signature in the corner, it wasn't his. It was a jagged, unfamiliar scroll. A frantic terror seized him. He had to destroy it. He grabbed a palette knife, his hand shaking, and lunged at the canvas. But as he brought the blade down, his hand froze in mid-air. He couldn't move. He felt a cold energy radiating from the painting, holding him in place. The eyes of the portrait seemed to glow, and a voice, his own but not his own, echoed in his mind. "You wanted to paint the truth, Julian. This is the truth. This is me." The man in the portrait slowly began to move. Not just his expression, but his entire form. One painted hand reached out, pushing against the surface of the canvas as if it were a thin sheet of film. The fabric of the canvas rippled and stretched. Julian watched, paralyzed with horror, as the painted figure began to climb out of its two-dimensional prison. The smell of oil paint and something else, something ancient and rotten, filled the air. As the figure solidified into a three-dimensional being, Julian felt himself growing faint, his own form becoming less substantial. He felt a chilling pull, as if his very life force was being siphoned away. He looked down at his hands and saw they were becoming transparent, the colors fading, the lines blurring. He was becoming flat, textureless, like a painting. The figure, now fully formed and standing where the canvas once was, looked exactly like Julian, but with the cold, cruel eyes from the portrait. It picked up a brush, dipped it into a pot of black paint, and turned to the now empty frame. Julian, trapped within the canvas, could only watch. His last sensation was the cold, wet touch of a brushstroke painting over his fading consciousness, trapping him in a silent, two-dimensional prison of eternal darkness. The next day, Elias Thorne returned to the studio. He found a stunning self-portrait hanging on the easel, a true masterpiece of realism and soul. Standing beside it, admiring the work, was the painter, Julian Vance. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" the painter said, a triumphant smile on his face. "I've finally captured the truth." Thorne nodded slowly, his ancient eyes glinting. "Indeed you have," he replied, as he handed over a hefty bag of gold. He took the painting, and as he walked out he didn't notice the faint, desperate scratching sound coming from within the canvas, or the single, freshly painted tear that seemed to bead on its surface. And so, the portrait that painted itself found a new home in Thorne's collection, a silent testament to a terrible bargain. And the painter who called himself Julian Vance went on to achieve great fame, his portraits renowned for their chilling, almost predatory, insight into his subjects. After all, he had a unique talent for capturing a person's very soul. He'd had practice. Thank you for joining me here at the Midnight Fire. Remember to look closely at the art you admire. You never know what's looking back. Until next time, sleep well, if you can. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a descent into the dark. Good night.